Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson, without my computer in front of me for a change. Hope you all are doing well today. As many of you have probably heard, I probably sound like a broken record a little bit. A madman walked into a grocery store in a New York town, New York City, a New York town called Buffalo, New York, and shot up a grocery store. Shot it up, basically. Killed about 10 people, including the life of one brave soul, one security guard who actually sacrificed his being to try to save the lives around them from being transgressed by this person, and then afterwards calmly walked outside and surrendered himself to the police. I've debated this. I'm not going to. Actually, yes, I am going to say his name. I'm going to say his name because it's important for us to deal with the bare facts of reality as they are, not to sanitize them so that we can achieve some broader aim or goal. And the broader aim or goal would be to, don't give him the infamy he wants. Well, unfortunately, we have to deal with what happened. So a shooter called Peyton Gendron, unfortunately, did this horrible act. And ever since he did this horrible act, of course, there have been people hopping on this occurrence to push for a variety of different political ideas and motives. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, has used the deaths of these people at this grocery store to push for censorious policies regarding social media content. Her argument is that hate leads to real-world violence, and therefore it is the moral imperative of all social media companies to just go ahead and get rid of hateful content, as if that would stop someone from doing something like this. But also we have people like the Reverend Al Sharpton, who said, and I'll quote, President Biden should have a White House meeting of Black, Jewish, and other people talk about their efforts about hate crimes. And of course, we had other people like Tariq Nasheed, who is a pretty notorious race baiter, who essentially said that this is purely an anti-Black attack, and that this anti-Black attack is going to be covered up by the white media, because the white media, in the words of Tariq, are going to be trying to run cover for this guy in terms of talking about his life and giving him, very cozy depiction. That has not happened, by the way. Tariq Nasheed is filtering his prejudice and trying to make it a method of analysis, which is always a bad thing, by the way. You had so many people. You had people comparing Gendron to Kyle Rittenhouse, even though Kyle Rittenhouse's actions were heroic, but they were also deferred. Rittenhouse didn't want to shoot anybody, but he was compelled to shoot someone because his life and limb were threatened under the direct threat of a few radical protesters who wanted to burn down the building and cause chaos, some of whom had passed that we won't go into in this video. But again, this information is very important. So we understand this is being used. We understand that there are people like Rashida Tlaib that are trying to cast this, and Hakeem Jeffries of New York, who are trying to cast what happened as simply a consequence of white supremacy. And of course, there are other politicians out there decrying and attacking white supremacy. And my friends, while I think white supremacy or any racial supremacy is execrable, it is disgusting, it is grotesque, it is offensive to any or prudent moral sensibilities, especially those rooted in the ethos of the American experiment, the idea that all men are created equal and are endowed with their creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that governments are formed by the consent of the governed to adhere to these rights, it is condemnable. Having said that, there is a single-minded focus being undertaken by these progressive politicians and these left-wing activists, which entirely fixates on white supremacy without actually condemning all forms of racial supremacism, or as I will say it, racial collectivism. My friends, what we saw happen in Buffalo the other day is not simply a result of white supremacy, although it is. It is a result, more broadly, of racial collectivism. And all racial collectivism has the potential to turn into what we saw in Buffalo, but regardless, whether it does or not, it is condemnable in principle. Now, some of you may not understand what I mean when I say racial collectivism, so allow me to explain. Racial collectivism is this idea that someone, by virtue of their identity, particularly by virtue of their skin color, is a part of this greater project, this greater experiment that other people of a similar skin color have undertaken. So the idea when it comes to white racial collectivism is that whites are Europeans, and therefore, since all whites have this common European ancestry, they are a part of the white race, both phenotypically and in some cases culturally as well. So racial collectivism essentially subsumes and consumes the individual into the white or the black or whatever other race collective. Black collectivism, black racial collectivism is the same kind of thing. And we have different variations of black racial collectivism. We have the black Hebrew Israelites, the Nation of Islam, the Pan-Africanists, and they essentially believe that African Americans have a common destiny, a common project, which is asserted and certified by and way of their skin color. And within the confines of racial collectivism of all sorts, individualism dies. The truth of the human being, the fact that we are all individuals primarily, even in respect to our cultural and communal ties, the fact that we are individuals, that fact dies and goes to the wayside and is conveniently forgotten for this goal that apparently goes beyond any single person because, again, their race is allegedly bigger than themselves. The problem also with racial collectivism is that it is an example of what I have called in this channel, and what people who have known my channel for a little bit and people who will get to know it will know as well. It's called proximity ethics. Proximity ethics, my friends, is this idea that you can assert a value judgment, a good or bad, a judgment about something as good or bad, solely on the basis of it looking like something that you might approve of or it being of a certain appearance. So I always use this example. Let's say that I have a gasoline can and there's a fire happening right next to me. And someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, you started the fire, didn't you?" But they don't consider that my gasoline can could have been to fill up my car with gasoline. But they assume, simply because I am proximal to a damn gasoline can, that I am the one who started the fire, that I'm an arsonist. Proximity ethics assumes, simply because you're white, simply because you're European or black, you have some kind of broader destiny bequeathed upon you by your race. And that is a non sequitur. It makes no sense because it fails to establish a concrete connection between you and that thing other than how you look like. My friends, racial collectivism destroys the place of the will. Our races, or the land that people of our race, or whatever you might want to say, of our skin tone, have inhabited, nothing substantial for our existence as moral or prudent people. The shooter, Mr. Gendron, in his manifesto, and I read a good majority of it, and I'm not going to link it because I don't want to get taken down by YouTube, but it'll be on my locals at christianwatson.locals.com afterward if you want to come see. In his manifesto, the shooter essentially said that he was undertaking the violence that he was going to do at the supermarket to preserve a future for white people and white children. And he even said in one part of the manifesto that he has no problem killing children because non-white children are invaders, and non-white children will grow up to be non-white adults, and they will grow up to have families, and they will grow up to continue the destruction of his culture. The killer, Mr. Gendron, was concerned with this great replacement idea that allegedly, since demographics are changing, whites are threatened, white culture is threatened, and therefore everything's gone to pot, and he has to use violence. Violence is the only way to handle it. But these terms only make sense on a collectivistic scale, and when you actually investigate them on that scale, they absolutely make no sense whatsoever. See, here's the problem with collectivism. It seems plausible because human beings are social creatures. We are social animals, and we congregate in groups. And so when I say collectivism, one may say, well, don't you simply mean community? No. Community is a voluntary enterprise that people come together on the basis of values. And it is endemic to human nature for us to come together on the basis of values. But hear me when I say this, ladies and gentlemen. My values as a person, or your values as a person, have zero zilch to do with your skin tone. No one comes out of the womb having a certain set of values because their skin tone is a certain way. Skin tone is an absolutely aesthetically meaningless quality which is oftentimes conflated with value judgments because shallow and mediocre minds have, through the years, tried to append false importance to it. On its own, skin tone means nothing. Race means nothing. It's the associations and the conflations made by intellectuals, made by race baiters, made by people who have something to gain or who had something to gain with the invention of race. That's how this has some meaning to it now in our current social circumstance. There is no white race. There is no white family. There is no white future. None of that exists. And even amongst Europeans, there are cultural distinctions that sometimes lead to infighting amongst Europeans. Once again, the principle of distinctions is not honored with collectivism, because for the collectivist, everything is the same. Everything within a certain group is the same. And collectivism, being as such as it is a rejection of reality. Because in reality, whether we're starting from the natural premise, looking at ecosystems, looking at rivers, looking at food chains in certain ecosystems, requires differentiation, requires distinction. Human society is no different. If we were all the same on the basis of our skin color, distinction wouldn't exist. Differences in skills wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have the rich society we have right now. But unfortunately, so many people have fallen under the allure of collectivism. And it's not just racial collectivism that's the problem as well. In this context it is. But it's also political collectivism, religious collectivism. All forms of collectivism are an existential threat to our understanding of the truth, people. And they can lead, since they are conceived in a false reality, they can lead to you doing things that are condemnable in reality. When you have an idea that creates a false world in your head, you can justify ideas within that world, but the problem is that world is actually detached from the real world of moral consideration. For this viewpoint that I'm expressing to you all right now, I had some white racial collectivists on Twitter contact me and say, Mr. Watson, America was actually founded on white racial collectivism. Well, let me read you guys something, and I hope that it's compelling to you. I'm going to let you guys go in a second, but I hope that this is quite compelling to you. This was written in July 4th, 1776. It should be quite familiar to you. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and that whenever any government, any form of government, becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundations on such principles, organizing its powers in such form. Now, it is quite obvious to me, my friends, that this country was not constituted upon racism foundationally. It is true that there were quite a few racists who had political power in America and who used the institution of slavery to perpetuate something in America, perpetuate their ilk in America for a long while. But this attempt to say, because there were racists in America, or because there were racist laws in America, our foundations are inherently racist, is, again, proximity ethics, but also it's confusion. It confuses the local with the universal. The sentiments expressed in the Declaration at the very first start of it are universal, and they're based in empirically observed reality. Slavery was a temporary distortion of the American experiment that has long since passed away because many Americans recognize the force, power, and truth of the universal principles. My friends, so long as collectivism continues to dog the American political conversation, whether it's in politics, whether it's in race, whether it's in religion, regardless of where it is, we can expect to see more actions that do not conform with the flow of things, the flow of reality, to occur. And so long as progressives or anyone else who is in the media or in politics continues to push that white supremacy is the problem and not all forms of collectivism, the moment progressives keep condemning white supremacists, but will not condemn Farrakhan, and will not condemn the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, and will not condemn any of them, is the moment that we have absolutely, or we are not going to be getting the answers as Americans that we deserve to this issue. There is no difference between Elijah Muhammad and Richard Spencer, or Louis Farrakhan and Richard Spencer, in essence. In form, there is. Richard Spencer has a younger audience. Farrakhan has an older audience. Richard Spencer is an atheist. Farrakhan's beliefs are rooted strictly in mysticism. Sure, in form, but in essence, both of them are fighting for the same thing. There is no difference between black power and white power. They're both the same thing. There's no difference between white supremacy and black supremacy. They're both the same thing, going in the same direction towards different avenues, but going exactly in the same direction to the same destination. There is no difference between white lives matter and Black Lives Matter, other than the adjective attached to both statements. Let's reject all collectivism. Let's embrace individualism. And Gendron said in his manifesto that individualism, nihilistic, hedonistic individualism, was a problem with society, because he's a collectivist. Let's reject collectivism. Let's embrace individualism. And let's realize that everyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their creed, has inherent epistemic fundamental value as a human being. And let's conform our actions to that principle. Because if we do not, we'll have a bigger problem than white supremacy on our hands. Think on it. My friends, love you guys so much. If you love me, please support my Patreon, patreon.com/officialcwatson. Support me on PayPal, which would mean officialcwatson@gmail.com. Please go to Locals, which is where the manifesto will be put at. christianwatson.locals.com. Please join my Discord, which is comment section down below. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video. This message is dynamite, my friends. And my friends, I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.